Hello, everybody. This is your host, Aram Melkoumov, and you're listening yet to another interview on our product innovation series. Today, I'm joined by Tom O'Neill, who's the founder and CEO of Parallax, which is a resourcing, forecasting, and analytics platform that helps digital agencies like the one I have and software consultancies grow. Tom, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. Great to talk to you.
Cool. To kind of kick it off, when we had a chance to connect before, there was a certain topic of discussion that I really wanted to kind of get into with you today, and that was the idea of a product advisory council. So, to my understanding, before you started Parallax, one of the key things that you did really well, in my opinion, and successfully was before building a product, you focused on having a strong advisory council. So, let's just start off by first telling the audience what is a product advisory council and when did you exactly start it?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the kind words. I do think it's critical to get great advice on where the product should go from people in the industry who might use the product. And that's where we started. We said, prior to building this product, I spent 14 years building a company that's very similar to yours. We did digital product development for all kinds of different companies and had a lot of experience in that. And I knew there was this gap in this tool that I wanted to build. But I also, as a student of user experience design, knew that like my own perspective on where that gap was narrow. And I wanted a wider perspective. And so the first thing that we did was we looked out to the industry and we picked 40 companies that we really thought represented best in class, like companies that we admired and we'd worked alongside for years and understood that they do quality work, they hire great people, and they might have a great perspective on the same problem. And I personally reached out and said, hey, I want to build a product that would serve companies like yours to solve these kind of sets of problems. Would you spend 30 minutes with me just to kind of understand how you see this problem and maybe how you're solving it? And it was really easy for me to get those meetings because I spoke to that founder, that COO, the people that I was trying to get after. I spoke to them with some empathy for where their role was, and I spoke to them with some experience. And in those meetings, those introductory calls, I said, hey, I'm trying to recruit people for this product advisory council. And with that, what I want you to do is like expose to me like how you are solving these problems by allowing me to interview people on your team who are working in resource planning every day, allowing me to kind of understand from your leadership team's perspective what foresight or insight they might be missing, and really go deeper and wider into the problem set that we were trying to discover. And I think a lot of people enjoy being a part of building something. I think that the idea of being an advisor to a product development team is appealing for them and that's kind of how we positioned it, as like, hey, you're going to get to have some input on how we build this, and we're not going to try to sell it to you. We really just want to know, like, from your perspective, how this should be built if you were to build it yourself, kind of. And it was really easy to get people to sign up for that because, again, I think people love to help and people like to, they love to use that subject matter expertise that they've worked so hard to develop over the years. So, so yeah, that's how we did it. It was pretty, grassroots and, just a little bit of hustle.
Yeah. And like doing customer development early on in terms of finding the companies and then reaching out to them, like what were some of the, channels or methods you used? Was it just like email outreach, cold outreach? Were they warm introductions to some of those companies that you ended up working with? Like what was like the most successful mechanism for you?
All of the above, I think. It started by identifying the ones that we thought were the best targets and really understanding why we thought they were the best target. Because then we would use all of those channels you described until we've got the introduction. But we were doing it from a point of Yeah, we knew about them. We were saying, hey, I've heard from so and so that you're awesome for this reason, or we believe you can provide this very specific insight on our product. That's why I'm reaching out to you, and being very like high touch and personalized. Whether it was a direct like LinkedIn message, or I'd find a way to get their email address, or it was a warm introduction through someone I knew. The important part was that we were very deliberate and intentional about helping them see why we thought they were so important to the mission that we were on.
Okay, great. And so once you kind of got the people on the product advisory council, how did you run those sessions? How frequently? And then most importantly, what I'd love to know is like, what kind of insights did you get out of that council that really helped, with the product development side of things?
Yeah, so for each one, we kind of had like an onboarding process. So the first thing that we would do in onboarding is do a series of interviews with key stakeholders from their team. And those were usually like quick 30-minute interviews where we'd schedule them, starting with kind of that CEO, but then people who do the specific roles that might use our product in the future. And then post that onboarding, we would do... at first, we did like a monthly meetup. We moved that eventually to quarterly. And those just, because as the company gets bigger, it's harder to manage. But in those meetups, we would invite people, and we put a lot of work into building a big attendance into those meetups. And so just like we did with our original outreach, or maybe like you might do in like a sales motion in your product company, we had a list and we knew we wanted to be there, and we were very deliberate about trying to make sure that they were there. And that started by, we'd say like, we get a few of the key people and figure out when they could meet and make sure that we picked a date that enough of the kind of influencers, if you will, were sure to be there. And then we could like email the other constituents and say, hey, we're meeting on March 3rd, and your friend John has already committed. We'd love to see you there. We kind of created this like FOMO for these events that worked really well. And then a part of the appeal for these events was that they were going to be involved in a workshop to help design a certain part of our app. But B, and this was usually the precursor, we would have like an open like working session about the specific business problem that we were trying to solve that was kind of unrelated to our product. And so like, for an example, how do you think about project level accounting? It was like a big, problem set that we were trying to break down. And many of these owners and operators didn't have a chance to discuss that specific business problem amongst a bunch of peers that they respected, until we offered this platform to them. And so they got a lot of value out of just having that discussion about how do you think about project accounting with a bunch of other CEOs or COOs of similar sized companies, right? Or sometimes bigger or more mature companies. And that ended up being the key to these like meetups, is that they were getting a lot of value out of it from a industry knowledge perspective on their own, and we were able to just continue to pull the string on that and build even more like intelligence about what the market desired in designing our product.
Okay. And from all these sessions and these workshops that you ran, I'm sure there was like one or two big call to Jesus moments or whatever you want to call them, in terms of understanding maybe something that you had a big assumption against, or something that you totally miscalculated. Was there anything that stands out that really kind of helped shape the product to what it is today?
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that we learned is that these owners, operators, these people who are in the business, that they really wanted us to stay in our lane, where the rest of the products on the market that we compete against, they're more monolithic and they're trying to do all of the things, They said, just stay in your lane, like do that one thing super well, and then automate the workflow between these other systems, and resist the urge to build the functionality that exists in our other platforms, like we integrate with project management tools and timesheet systems and invoicing systems. And they said, don't build that stuff. Like that stuff's already done. Like no one's done what you're doing really well. Do that really well. Let us do the other things. And I was happy to learn that through this, but to the level of like, I didn't expect for it to be to that level of like, they felt extremely passionate about it. And, yeah, and that was a huge aha moment. And I think that one of the best quotes I got out of that was that there was this a former chief operating officer of IDEO. He said that, Tom, like nobody ever leaves a banging nightclub when it's on fire or when it's going really well. Not on fire, they probably leave, but nobody leaves a banging nightclub because the doors are unlocked. If your system does what it's doing really well, like people are going to stay using it. You don't have to be worried about us accessing data in your system in another system or not being the source of truth for everything. Like if you're doing what you're doing really, really well, no one's going to leave. And so you don't have to worry about control. And I thought that was a really good way to think about it. And I think he's right. And so that's one thing that we learned that I'm really proud of.
No, that's really interesting. And then from the Product Advisory Council, or maybe through your leadership events that you had and you maybe still run, did any of those relationships lead into client relationships for Parallax at the end of the day?
Certainly. Yeah, I'd say, I wouldn't say all of them, but maybe half of them. And it literally was not our intent, like honestly, but yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. Because we're always kind of trying to figure out with our different client projects, what are good mechanisms or channels to explore early on in a product ideation stage in terms of good ways to tap into your target market, right?
Well, I should mention quickly that like one of the things that we did was, we had these 40 companies to start with, and as we like learned more about each of these companies, we realized that they were inclusive of a much larger market segment than we had originally planned to go after. Like we had very large companies, we had very diverse companies. They were all in like the same general market. But through that Product Advisory Council, we realized like in order to get our product to market very quickly, we had to narrow our focus. So we went from like, I would say probably one large segment, and we broke it down into probably 15 smaller segments. And we realized that there was like 3 of those smaller segments that we could get a minimum viable product out and built within 6 months to serve a smaller segment. We could sell them faster. That size company would have a sales cycle that was short enough. And we could onboard them and get them to a point where we're getting ROI in a short time. And so, again, we had this rubric that we created that was based on how fast can we build a product that helps them, how fast can we sell it to them, this kind of company, and then how fast can they get return on investment. We scored each of those companies in our 40 by those 3 things and determined that like there's a focus area that we need to start with. And that was like critical to our success because we had within 12 months of like starting to write code, we had we had 200K in revenue from some of those companies that were in our initial focus. And part of the way that we did that is that we offered the companies that fit, we called it the Goldilocks zone, those companies that fit, we said, hey, we'll give you a free trial for 6 months if you would be the first beta customers of this. And they loved that. They've become some of our best customers. And then at the end of that beta, we converted them to paying customers. And that's how we got, I think it was actually 250K within the first 6 months. We did 6 months of build. We converted those, gave them 6 months of beta, converted them to paying customers all in with one year. And again, it also taught us that now there's this subset of this larger market that we'll eventually go after, that we can, in a very short order, sell, onboard, and bring to value other Goldilocks customers. And it was really informative for us.
No, that's fantastic. And a follow-up question to that, like, I sometimes have debates with people about, when you want to bring on somebody to participate in like your customer development process, the idea of like whether or not you should incentivize them with like gifts and gift cards and stuff like that versus something else. Like some people say that you shouldn't actually offer them anything. Some people say, no, you got to give them something to give them their time. And I just want to kind of explore that with you. I really liked what you did with like the 6 months free trial. I think that's a great way to do it. What else have you kind of seen or tried out?
I agree with the people that say you shouldn't need to incentivize them. Honestly, I think that like the right people that you want to influence your product, they're passionate about the business problem, and they're going to get value personally if you position it that way, out of like working with other smart people like them in solving the business problem. Again, imagine ours is a resource planning tool. So imagine there's these 40 chief operating officer type people. They all have their version of a resource planning spreadsheet, and we created a safe space for them to come together and kind of compare notes, and say, how are you doing it? How are we doing it? And like learn from each other what's working. And if I have to like buy you dinner to like want to be excited about talking about this nerdy spreadsheet thing, like you're probably not going to be a great influence on our product. If you just kind of intrinsically see value in like learning and developing your own perspective on this with a group of people, you're awesome for our project advisory council. Does that make sense?
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. It's just like I think it's not really a debate, so I'm glad we're on the same page. All right, next question I have, and I'm going to bring up a quote you mentioned when we spoke last time, which is that people say that they speak to customers, but they don't do it right. What's the biggest mistake that you've seen people make when it comes to that, and how do you make it right?
I think that the biggest mistake that people make when trying to talk to their users or their customers is they don't approach the conversation with a wide enough perspective. Like, let me give you an example. Facebook, I think we all know that Facebook, the customer isn't me, the consumer, who's like posting photos of my children, right? We know that the customer is the people who advertise to me, the consumer, right? They're the ones who pay the bill. And so I think that if I were a great user experience designer at Facebook, I would approach any design challenge related to the human interface for me, the end user, as through a lens of like, how are we going to engage this user to serve our customer? I think it's important to have that like wider perspective when like interacting with users. To take it back to our product, the primary user of our product is a project manager or like a resource planning person, though like, and they have a lot of advice for us on how the product should function. And we listen and we talk to those people all the time, but we take a very deliberate effort to say, okay, what would the COO do? What would the CEO do? We want these project managers, these resource planners to attack their work inside Parallax with the benefit of like a perspective that the CEO or COO might have, because that's going to make our customers' business better if they have that wider angle view, if they can really understand more about the big picture of the business. And so sometimes that means that they might ask for widget A, but we can help them frame a priority on widget B because it serves that bigger picture. And even though like for them personally, they'd like to make their job easier for widget A, they'd trade that off for widget B because they know it fits the bigger vision. And so, yeah, I think the number one thing that people do wrong when talking to customers is they just don't think about it from like the the wider angle view from the business perspective. They don't think about the business objective when they're talking to individual users enough, in my opinion.
And so that that must require you to have a really good understanding of what the business operators, the CEO, the C-suite really need in order for you to make sense of what these project managers who are maybe like the end users using it day to day care about, right? And so how do you bridge that world? Because like for example, project managers might give you tons of ideas. Oh, yeah, I want this, I want that. But how do you actually like listen, digest, inform yourself whether or not, okay, do they really need that, or like associate to like the business problem that you know the C-suite actually cares about, without impeding or like you know blocking their point of view on that request.
Mm-hmm. Very carefully. No, I think that it is a design challenge. Usually, the way that our design process works, and we use our product advisory council for this, is if we're going to design a new module, for example, we are going to start with like scoring that like new module on what the overall business value of this module is, kind of on the higher level like vision for our product scale, right? Because like our product brings very specific like 3 or 4 bullets of like business value on a high level, right, which are related to forecasting and such, right? And so we'll say like, which theme does this module kind of represent, and then who are the stakeholders at the leadership level that have a good perspective on how that value is applied like down the chain, you know? So we interview that senior stakeholder first. That's the first set of interviews we do. And then we take that perspective and then we use that to design the interviews for the individual contributors who will actually use the product. Because we know that like those people on the front line, they're super smart. They're closer to the problem. They're closer to the people, to the projects, to all this stuff. But they just don't have that wide angle view as naturally as these people that are in the more leadership roles. So we bring that wide angle view to those interviews with the individual contributors with, some like higher level user story and kind of higher level business objective. And they pick it up really quick. It's not like I have to like teach them that there's this business value that they know. No. But then when we frame all the questions from that point of view, from that angle, and help them prioritize in the moment, saying like, this versus that, which one better serves these goals? They're so smart. Like it's not that hard, But I think a lot of people don't approach it that way, right? They think more about like, well, you're the expert, you're the user, tell me everything. But they don't put it in context with all of the like the greater picture in mind. Mm-hmm. And so, you suffer from like frequency bias or recency bias. You're suffering from like, I don't know, like all the different things because you're putting them on the spot. If you can set them up to win, they'll exceed your expectations.
No, for sure. Okay. Next question I have is talking about kind of what it takes to successfully build a product, right? I think it's a very large, open-ended question, but we know that the best products are the ones that are carefully built with the right principles and the right purpose and the right pain points in mind, which should be quite clearly defined. If there was a way that you would look at it, what would you say is the best way to approach on clearly defining what are like the initial foundational elements that it takes to build any product?
I feel like a broken record saying this, but I think it's like finding that group of people that you trust to help you narrow something that is, quite big into something that is achievable and has the highest impact in the shortest period of time. You know, the term minimum viable product is thrown around a lot. And I think that in my old firm where we built custom software all the time, we used to scoff at what we called like genius design, where it's like one person, they believe so strongly and they're such a genius about this problem that they're just going to design it themselves, you know, with like a limited, you know, and selective input from other people. That I just don't believe in that. I don't believe it works, you know. I think it's okay to paint a big picture vision and say, this is where I think we should go. But I really think you need to validate that vision with a wider perspective, because we have really smart people working for us. And I'd say geniuses, but like on our own, you know, we're limited. But as a larger group of people, it's pretty easy to see the pattern so quickly. That approach for us, it leads to so many fun moments in our product, journey so far. I don't know how many times people have said, it looks like you've like hacked our Google Sheets, because like that's exactly how we've been trying to do this, you know, and it's not an accident. I've seen hundreds of those Google Sheets, you know, and again, the patterns are so easy to identify, you know, so yeah, I think it doesn't have to be 12 months or 16 months of like discovery. It just has to be very deliberate. And I think you have to really want that outside perspective. You know, you have to really think like, I don't want to do this the genius design way because I know I'm smart, but what makes me a genius is that I can ask really good questions of these other people, and I can, you know, build this wider perspective because I can engage them in that conversation. That's what makes us smart. We asked very good questions that people wanted to answer and were excited about answering, you know. Yeah. Sure, we had a point of view. Sure, we brought that perspective to those conversations. That's what helped shape the vision, but we really did want their input, you know. And that's, I think, what separated us from how other people do MVP.
No, that's great. No, I've actually, just through you and maybe a few other people, I've only ever heard of the Product Advisory Council approach. So you definitely did it, I think, in my opinion, the correct way. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
Next question I have, Tom, is you've been building product a long time, whether that was through the agency experience you have or now with Parallax. Through that time, were there any big wake-up call moments that you went through that really kind of changed the way you do something? Maybe like one or two that really kind of come to mind.
Man, that's a big question, because it seems like every day. Yeah. You know, I think a lesson that I've learned through this iteration, but I felt like I've learned a few times now, and I would love to not continue to relearn, is that trust your gut. You know, I think that there's been a couple of times through this current journey where my gut said that a decision that we were making about, you know, kind of like maybe let's say like a technology decision, you know, my gut said that we were maybe over engineering something, but I was trying to be a empowering leader, and I just said, okay, let's try to do it, you know, and it turned out that I was right. You know, it was the wrong decision, you know, and I don't fault our team for that. I think that looking back, I don't necessarily regret the decision. I think that we all learned together from that decision, and it had value, even though it didn't go the way that we had hoped, you know. But if I had it to do again, I hope that I trust my gut, because while there was value in the mistake, it wasn't really enough to offset the cost of the mistake, you know. And so, you know, as leaders, sometimes we have to make tough decisions that are not going to be super popular with our product teams. I hope that you don't have to pull that card too often, but you should sometimes if your gut says that that's the right decision. Again, if you're doing that every day, you're probably in the wrong seat. but if you have to do it from time to time, you know, I think it's okay. And and I think your team will thank you for it in the end, even though that the short term it might not be as fun.
Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna jump into this fireside format approach that we
Okay.
have, which
All
is
right.
quick question answers. So try to keep the responses short if you can.
Concise. I'll do my best.
Um, First question I have, I always like saying this one because it throws people off. What would you say is an aspect of product development that money can't fix?
Attitude. Yeah, I think that the way people show up, and yeah, I think that you can't fix that with money.
Okay, cool. How do you ask better questions when it comes to product development?
Know your know the person that you're asking the question of. Empathy.
Empathy? Okay. Um, Over the years that you've been in product development, what have you become better at saying no to?
Crazy features that the customers ask when we're trying to get a new customer.
Okay. Any kind of core, like what's like maybe one or two top product lessons that you keep coming back to?
Number one is focus. The more you can focus on a user, a segment, a market, the better. And number two is communication internally. I think the more that we can stay on the same page and aligned on like what the roadmap, the product vision, our values are, the more success we'll have, especially when scaling.
Okay. Um, if you could only work 2 hours per week when it comes to what you do, product, what would you do with those 2 hours?
I would spend an hour listening to my team, both the people that interact with our salespeople, our customers that are new customers, and the people who build the product, and like kind of listen what's happening, and then spend another hour kind of writing an email of like what I heard and how I heard it, and distributing that to the team.
Okay, I love it. Last but not least, what personal investments have you made into your career that really helped make you better in what you do?
Great question. I've sought mentorship. I've pursued leadership from people that I look up to and admire in the industry, and asked for them to help me solve problems or consider new opportunities or challenges. And yeah, mentorship, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Before we wrap up, is there anything you want to share with the audience as like a final thought?
Yeah, I'd say that, product development should be fun. Innovation should be fun. I've found that the attitude of the team, the way that people show up, the fun that they have, it is 100% tied back to like feeling that gratification from the value your product creates. There's nothing that's better than posting to our general Slack channel when we get some customer whose life has been changed by our product. There's nothing that's more fun for that developer who like spent 6 months building this feature to see the customer's eyes light up when they know that it could change the way they think about their work. Like it's so important to really have empathy and understand like who your users are, because then you get those awesome gratifying moments that keep us stoked, that keep us in the missionary mode, not the mercenary mode. And it's critical.
I love that missionary mode. Great. Tom, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on our show today. And always thank you to our listeners for tuning in and supporting us. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And I hope that the listeners could take something away.